it made me realize that perfectionism somewhat is an illusion. It also hinders the way of how you bring ideas into the world. Because I do think having a rut just means that you're somewhat also involved into the environment that you've been to for like too long a period of time. Creativity is essential, and innovation, technology will be a driver, but you will always be in the driver's seat in making sure that you also incorporate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Makes You Wonder, where I sit and wonder about things. If this is not your first rodeo with us, welcome back and thank you for sticking with it, maybe even subscribing and liking and sharing and leaving reviews. Who knows? If you do that, I am eternally grateful, even if it's a 1-star review. I appreciate that. I appreciate the sentiment of making your voice heard. And if you're new here, this is a show where I have conversations with people from the intersection of art and technology about the future of human creativity in the age of AI. And this show is also a grand exploration to explore, I guess, my own creativity and the creativity we are nurturing at Wondercraft, I guess. And as I talk to our guest about today, this did not come very easily for me. Creativity for me is a constant battle of just two loud voices trying to, out volume each other. One telling me to just go on and this is fine, create for your own sake and for the fun of doing it, while the other one is just yelling at me that I'm absolutely worthless and I should just stop whatever I'm trying to do. Human creativity is fun in that way, especially mine. But I think most people out there can identify with this to some regard. And I'm speaking to our guest about that today. I thought that was really fun to hear her side of it as well. And I think I'm going to explore that a bit more with our guests as they are adding to our season here for the next recordings. But joining us today is Eva Simone Lihotzky. She's the general manager of Serviceplan AI Lab in Munich, where she leads the charge in shaping AI strategy and innovation across Serviceplan and their group of brands, which is Serviceplan, Media Plus, and Plan.net. And Eva is a thought leader in AI ethics and innovation management with a focus on how business can leverage AI while maintaining responsible practices. And her expertise spans from the intersection of technology, creativity, and leadership. And she's been a key figure in launching the AI labs in Munich and San Francisco. She's also the co-author of the 10 Moral Questions, How to Design Tech and AI Responsibly, which offers a framework for creating ethical products in tech. And her passion really for innovation, for entrepreneurship, for systems thinking and creativity really drives this mission to navigate the complex nature of AI and how it's evolving in consumption and how we create communications all across the industry and how to foster that creativity in a responsible way. And we talked about a lot of things, her personal creativity, how she got there, but also the practice that they're building at Serviceplan, which I find quite amazing, how you nurture and foster a creative culture within a company, and also what regulation and how we really make AI a positive evolution and innovation for humanity. A lot is in there, so I appreciate you watching and listening. And go buy her book. You can find her. You can find the links in show notes, as you can find other links in there. So go check it out. I really liked speaking to Eva. She's a very warm persona, and I wondered a lot of things in this episode, and I'm happy to share that with you. Here's our conversation with Eva. Well, Eva, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here. As we're getting started with the recording, getting warmed up a little bit, let's repeat what you just told me. Where in the world are you? Where are you? What's your studio?
My studio is part of the office, our headquarters in Munich. That's where I am today. And I'm really happy to be on the show and have this conversation with you.
Amazing. Yeah, we're so thrilled to have you. And I just explained to all the viewers and listeners who you are. So we're going to get into a bit of your background and unleash this conversation around
Yes.
creativity. I'm so excited to get into it with you because you come with such an amazing background and expertise in your new role, obviously. Leading AI over at Serviceplan and the Serviceplan AI Lab out of Munich, and very excited to get into all of that with you. But I'd like to start a little bit from the top. I mean, you've been in consulting and marketing throughout your career, which is, I think, is fantastic, as I have as well. I've been in building companies, which is a lot about marketing and sales. And I reflected on this the other day when I was prepping for our conversation today, and how much everything has changed for brands and for marketers just these past, I mean, call it 20 years, right? It's staggering when you think about it. And at the core, brands need to communicate with their audience to really be something. And that used to be advertising to a large degree. If you go back throughout the years, like that was mass communication was a way to do it, press. But today it feels like every company needs to be a content creator to really be relevant in many ways. And I saw this, funny enough, as I was thinking about this, I stumbled across this meme clip on Instagram as I was just, wasting time. And I saw this clip of Jerry Seinfeld, if you remember that show, where Jerry and George, they sit in their corner restaurant and they just ask themselves, like, what are we doing with our lives? And the caption was, every small business owner all over the world trying to be a content creator. And I think that was so fitting from all the conversations that I have with entrepreneurs and startups, and how much you need to kind of rely on getting your message out there and coming up with new ways to communicate. And I think that's changing so much now with AI as well. But if I start out with a question to you, like, throughout your career, what do you think? How is brand building and communications different today than it was when you started out in the business?
Wow. I mean, one of the factors that I really see is this need for being and staying ahead, like this increased acceleration of, providing communication aspects to your customers, and also how you produce and bring the word out about like new products, new ideas, or also staying relevant. I do think that the need to really focus on that as an organization, as a brand, and somewhat finding at like the same time the balance to stay consistent. And I do think that earlier on, like when we started out, and also like several years ago, it was much more about finding the right communication ways, and the focus also on the target groups, whereas now it's really also finding the right amount of communication ways and like the channels that you want to reach your customers.
Do you think is it a more complex kind of landscape now of channels to choose from, or do you think that's different?
On the one hand side, it's more complex in regards to the channels, but it's also more complex in regards to the expectations that customers have into the relevance of the contents that you provide, on the information that you spread, and also around their context. Like, how do you bring value to their environments, or their kind of ways of living, and really also staying in that area, and also engaging with them became much more complex, as we're in like a lot of like information overwhelm on the one hand side, but then again also in the need to stay consistent. And I do think that is something that's challenging for like a lot of organization. And you like just mentioned the give. I do think that it's like for even smaller organizations, or even like family-owned businesses, way more challenging to provide that kind of like also ways of creativity to bring that into the way that they also communicate about their organization and products.
Yeah, so I think we'll get into. There's a few things I want to double click on there. We're going to get to that a little later, but I want to start what we do on this show. I'd like to hear more about your background and in your experience within the field of personal creativity, and also the kind of the business of creativity that you're in as well. And your career is a perfect blend of technology and creativity, it seems, which is very fitting for the topic of our show here, which is creativity in the age of AI. But what or who has most significantly influenced you in your personal creative journey? And how has this shaped your approach to your work and your life today?
So for me, really, also when I was thinking back, my family comes from an environment of arts. So my grandfather was responsible for heading an arts environment in the southern part of Germany. So back in the days, I was with him in exhibitions, openings, and like in an environment where there was a lot of like, um, artistic also vibes that I could indulge into early on. And that for me really paved the way into how I approach this kind of environment, what opened up to me really new worlds back then. And I realized that one of the drivers, and that is also a connector across my professional journey, is the part where I was super curious about it. How, does how did those artifacts really came to life? What was also the idea behind it? And the interesting part is that at the same time, I learned to play chess. And while you might say that the creative process is somewhat also um, like by accident, and you or like an idea just evolves in your head, chess really is like somewhat not the contrary, but it's really also about these complex structures and like systems thinking, so to say. So for me, that really was the balance between, on the one hand side, this artistic environment that I grew up in, and then again, indulging into the complex systems and the world of chess. That I also became a pro in, and like did a lot of tournaments. And it, for me, really was the perfect balance. And for me, it also reflects now the way how I, on the one hand side, leverage creativity in my day-to-day business, but then again, also love to work with systems and like tech to bring, on the one hand side, both together, but also leverage the one parts of it with the other.
I love that, and I want to get back to that as well later when we talk about how you bring creativity into the company you're at and the industry in general. So, Art, I mean, was there a specific moment in time that you can think back to where it's like that's the moment when I knew what I was going to do with my career, or have you been exploring and just leaning on that curiosity to find your way, or does it feel like you had a predetermined path to your current career?
I would not say that it was predetermined, but I was also like, I was always drawn by the fact to create something. And like, I do think that it's on the one hand side because I'm curious about the like the creational process of how things come to life, how you bring something into the world, or how also you bring value to like your environment, or like in our industry, to the customers, so to say. So I
Mm.
do think that having on the one hand side this vision that I do want to be at a spot where I can really bring like those visions into like the world and create it with a team, and also have some sort of those spaces of where I can really also dive into. But on the other side, also making sure that I'm always like learning, that I can somewhat also feed into the curiosity that I've always had. And now being at like the position that I am, with the potentials of the new technologies and like the AI tools or like environment that we're about to create, still is something that I'm super happy about, and also really feel as if I can bring all of the experiences that I had in previous jobs together.
I mean, you've explored the digital transformation of industries like art. You said coming from that. How do you believe the arts contributed to fostering creativity within tech and AI and innovation? Obviously, that's a big topic. But what's your take on the arts contributing to technology and how we're experiencing it now?
I do think that it provides like an environment where you can really like dive into the creational process and where you can use technology as an enabler, where it's rather about finding the ways of how you, on the one hand side, craft something, how you also use your imagination to form something new, but on the other side, that you then also combine it with the technological possibilities that you now have to, on the one hand side, be fast and try it out and potentially fail, but then again you can really also learn from it. You can then also craft and fine tune it in a way that has never been like that we've never been able to do so before, right? So I do think that it's really about, on the one hand, being able to leverage your creative imagination. And I do think that arts provide the perfect environment where you just really also pull things in, try things out, also throw yourself into the uncertainty, even if you want to say so. And then once you've found a way to express it or found a way to create it using technology or using technological tools to bring it in a way to the environment to also feel it or engage with it, I do think that it's something that has been really beneficial. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, this fascinates me endlessly, right? It comes down to, for me, it's also about the discussion around where we draw inspiration, the whole AI, discourse and discussion around, what kind of data we're training AI models on, and how that really differs or doesn't differ from how we create art. And you can see that, I don't know, the older I get, the more appreciation I have for really, really crazy art. And I mean crazy in the sense that it feels very new and outside of the box and never been done before. I'm starting to feel like I'm appreciating that a lot more because of how complex it is to create something that hasn't been done before, that doesn't feel like you are piggybacking on another idea. So I think for me, the discussion about AI and specifically generative AI is, from where do we draw inspiration? If you look at through music comes from a long line of just iterative kind of evolutions within music, right? We went from don't have to go back that far to see how jazz became kind of branched into rock and roll, and how that took form into different genres over time. It's all based on something, right? But you're taking something old and making something new of it, which is a very innate human condition in things that we do. And then now with AI, the discussion becomes, well, these AI models are they're not creating new things, right? They're extrapolating from the past. But much like what we normal humans do every day. I mean, I use how I learned how to write. The books that I've read influences how I write or how I act in certain ways. And it has an endless fascination to me, and how AI and technology and how humans, how we view these things differently depending on if it's AI or technology. And then another part of it is, and also how it's a discussion that I'm interested in, is how how the process of creating is different to humans. So there hasn't been that many studies here, but the ones I've read are quite interesting. Meaning, like, if you know that it's generated by AI, if you don't know what it's generated by AI, do you care? And with art, we do care quite a bit, right? When it's an art that is valued at $500 million, it's much because of the story and how it was created, who the person behind it was, and everything that went into the creation of that piece of art. When you can recreate that art simply with today's technology, or just an artist that can copy it, but it's not the same. And where do we draw the difference there, depending on how we consume things? Because art needs to be consumed with all this complexity in mind. But if I just wanted to, I want to see a pretty picture of a beach and it's AI generated, it might be perfect for me and the certain use cases. So it comes down to different kind of use cases. And I think that's relevant for how generative AI is used in creative fields, for instance, and what kind of difference that makes in terms of authenticity and the story behind it. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I was just listening to also how you described your intersection with arts and technology. And I was wondering if you know the artist Refik Anadol. Have you
I
heard of
don't.
him?
No, I don't
No.
think I do.
And I'm mesmerized by his work because the first time that I saw him in a live exhibition was like 5 years ago in Berlin, where he created like this 10 by 10 digital art visualization where he uses data points as input to train like interactive also like these kind of flowing visuals that really like you can fall into it, and like there is music in like the room that you're in, and like you look at this piece of art for like 15 minutes, and like for me it really does a lot with me. And at the same time, it's like because he used data points as the basis to train this visualization, you really then also understand about how the intersection, on the one hand side, finding those right data points that you can use to train a large language model, and then on the other side, on also then visualize it again. And I do think that there are so many possibilities that you can really take from, and like the latest exhibition that he's now, I guess, showcasing in Seoul is based on or like showcases it's called hallucinations or floristic hallucinations somewhat, and it's
Mhm.
like these beautiful flowers that you have at this huge screen, and I'm just like amazed by the fact that it's data, but it looks
Right.
so pretty.
Oh,
And
wow.
I do think that like having this sort of expression from a also like deeper meaning, because he wants to undermine the necessity to look on into the environment and see how like technology and like the environment either collide or also can be put together, and just raising that through an artifact is something that I do think really nice, that I do think really relevant and also reflects the kind of like spirit that we're in. And then again, where you also pointed out in terms of authenticity, um, having this need for acceleration, be it on the technological side, staying ahead on like the possibilities that we have, on the use cases that can be done. How do you ensure, as a marketer or also as an organization, to stay authentic in the way that you use it in a consistent manner? I do think that is also really something that we need to look into on what I like for like the buildup of trust, or but also to stay true to oneself, to the values that you have as a brand, but then again also as a person, right?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I think that's that you can. It feels like that is a debate all over. And I've been in podcasting for before we started Wondercraft. I was at a podcast company, and uh, which is basically the economy built on host reads, doing the reads for brands, right? It's a lot about that authenticity around a host, which comes to mind. And it's that's very different in different channels, right? Authenticity means something different depending on where you consume it. It feels like whether you see it on TV or you read an article, or you see a TikTok from a brand that's trying to reach you. What is authenticity there? And I feel like that's been kind of polarizing ends of how you stay authentic has to be when it used to be just being very open about and honest about what you're doing as a company and the mission. Now it's all these kind of side quests and side stories that you have to create for these different channels. TikTok, for instance, you can't run your TV ad on TikTok, right? No one's going to believe that's a good way to do it. Um, it needs to be more lo-fi than that, right? It needs to be just a handheld phone, and the same with podcasting. What do you think? How do you approach authenticity as a brand today? Is it as simple as looking at those different channels and see how you best can express what you're trying to say, or are there some principles that you use at Serviceplan, for instance, to kind of make sure, because it's so important, right? If you're not authentic, you can ruin so much brand equity in quite simply. So
and the reputation that you've built up, like for like a lot of time, and like for many brands, you've like it took you decades to be positioned where you are, or to be also like have the trust relationship that you've created with your consumers. And then on the other side, that means that this can now be erased by like a shitstorm on TikTok, or also like the false positioning of an influencer that you collaborate with. And like I do think that it has never been more important to be clear about the brand values that you have, and to integrate and to base your campaign or the way that you communicate. And then for me, like in my opinion, it shouldn't be dependent on the channels. It should be really dependent on the message that you want to send to the target group that you want to address, and making sure that you have like the values in sight, that you know about the values of your target group and that you're then able to find this right message, um, and that's the challenge, at the right timing and the right like also the kind of tone of voice and so on. That is for me still the most relevant part around how brands can be positioned, and that's also how we engage with our like with our clients. But then for us also, what comes into sight and also comes even more into the conversations are the topics around really the societal impact that communication can have, or that technology can have, in a way that you focus on sustainability aspects or the CSR parts of your brand communication parts, and that people and also like your customers really do believe that the actions that you put behind your words are real, are like to be trusted into, and that this creates the authenticity that you can then bring to the market. What, like, how do you see it?
I think that's solid advice. I think I get stuck in ways you actually communicate it. But you're right. You have to look at what the values you're trying to show. I think it's harder to hide today as a brand, as a result of that complexity and how you actually convey your brand, or your brand values and your company values. And also that, I don't know, I think authenticity works sometimes when there's something about authenticity and imperfection that makes things interesting as well. It's kind of brand communication, as well as showing maybe vulnerability or showing other aspects. It's a fine balance though, because brands can overdo it in certain edges, in discussions where maybe they I can feel sometimes where they don't belong, and that kind of can have a negative effect on their authenticity. They're trying to do something that they shouldn't. I mean, it's a hard subject now that I think about it. Yeah, but I liked your solid advice there on really looking at the core values. I think that's where it all starts, and then how you kind of match that up with the audience that you're trying to really speak to.
I mean, for sure, there is so much more to that. But you were asking about, like the key aspect of like positioning, and also for me, it just becomes clear that the faster the pace, the more clear and the more focused you need to be on who you really wanna like also represent as a brand or as an organization. But then, what you were just pointing out in regards of the imperfection, I mean, these are so much like they should be part of any like interactions that you have, in case like it really also like you can bring it to that. And that for me showcases also like the benefits and downsides of AI created content, because they always seem like, so to me they seem really posh, like there are no imperfections, even
Right.
like there are imperfections in a way that you have like 3 arms or like 6 fingers, but then like the faces and also the environments that you've created are so much like as if they were created like perfectly, so to say. And I do think that having that as a measure of also reality check does bring things into perspective. And then I was having this really interesting conversation about what reality really means in a like world where you can create content through AI tools, and how you perceive it in a way, but that then would get into like a potentially philosophical conversation.
Maybe we shall. Maybe we shall. I saw the new Pixel phone and what you can do there, and I read an article. I forget who wrote this now. I think it was maybe on The Verge. Basically, the world, we're not ready for this. what's the headline? And I'm not really for the fear mongering in media around AI. I think it's like a cheap shots out there, too many of them. But there's something to it when you can, manipulate pictures to include new elements in them and move people around. That is incredible, and you're in awe of this technology, what you can do. But you also, it's hard to maybe not think about the negative aspects of how you can use this to do people. Of course, I mean, you've written about this, you've talked about this at so let's get into it. How where are we now in your world? What's the next 12 months look like in terms of safety around AI? Do you see any big, what are your biggest concerns with the development that we're seeing now?
To be honest, my biggest concerns are the same for the US than they are also for Germany. They're the upcoming elections and how AI might shape voters' perceptions, and then also how it could be used to create information that are misleading, that might be fake, that can also influence the way that people perceive reality, or that they also perceive their societal impact. And I'm super also concerned, but like hopeful at the same time, that we find a solution about it, and that we also can use AI to really counter some of those where you just described AI generated like imageries that showcase realities that are not also the way that they really are supposed to be. But then on the other side, I'm also somewhat like seeing the political impact that it can have, and wondering how we might be as a society be ready to like put information into perspective, and also have this sort of literacy around it. And what you were referring to in regards of like the ethical moral conversations that we should have, or implication that they can have, I do think that we do see having also with Europe and the EU AI Act, even though they're like are talks of the benefits and the downsides of it, that cannot be put into like I do agree to like both sides, but still I do think that there needs to be a regulatory part to it, because at the moment there is no way around how you really bring that into the context of the impact that it has on society, and also how it shapes our perceptions. And then I do also think that as an like industry, we working with communication assets, and like the way that we bring information into the world, we also have the responsibility and need to have an approach, or like also our own values in the conversations, to bring that to the way that we shape those societal impacts in a larger end. And I do think that as an organization, what you always need to have is an awareness about it. You need to have guidelines ready that you can really also include into the way that you shape AI, use it for like yourself, but also for like the interactions with your customers, and then talk about it, make like also have like take a stand, bring it to those environments where it's really like where it brings visibility, and then can have an impact. Because otherwise I do see it really challenging to have a global like also community or build up around it, and just creating the impact that we really need.
Right. There's an interesting discussion now around regulatory measures in the US versus European Union. I read my old boss, Daniel Ek of Spotify. I think he and Mark Zuckerberg wrote a joint article around the issues of innovation, or rather, too much regulatory power early in an innovation cycle, I guess was their stance in the article. So I don't have it in front of me, but that was kind of the gist of it. I'm not an expert in this, obviously, but is that something that you see is, yeah, what's your take on that? Is, how much is too much regulatory power that can stifle innovation and job opportunity, especially if Europe is kind of putting a hamper on that innovation while it's kind of free for all in the US? How do you balance that kind of policy?
It's interesting that you mentioned balance, right? Because balance always means that you have to find an agreement between parties, that you have to find like common ground between interests, and like having the like important or influential tech CEOs talking about regulations where you know that they have interests, and where you know that
Right.
they also, probably are not super interested in being also like entrained by some sort of measures that might hinder their like way forward, or that they also might hinder their potentials to be or largen their commercial impact that they might have with their organizations. That for me is really the crucial part around how regulations find ways to put something into perspective where it might harm someone, but it has a larger impact on like someone else, or also the interests, and like potentially also safeguard the interests of like a larger part of society, for example, in that instance. And that is for me not clear yet, like who would that be, or how you really also find that kind of balance. But then again, I don't think that having no regulations and just like keeping the way that we have it right now cannot be the answer, given the way that we already see how technology is misused in some of those like important or societal contexts where I do see that it's shaping the influence in a negative way. But that also
Yep.
is something that we're keen, or that like with the group that I wrote the book about, that we have like passionate discussions around, because that it's somewhat connected to power structures or
Right.
structural ways how interests influence each other or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly complex, obviously, to try to find a perfect balance for everyone here, where innovation can happen in, the quote unquote good areas of innovation, and without seeing the negative aspect of it. So yeah, fascinating. Regulatory things aside, lots of other things I want to talk to you about. So I talk to you about, I mean, at Serviceplan, you're leading the integration of AI into the creative workflows, which is fascinating. So how do you see AI really enhancing human creativity within your organization and the broader industry that you're in?
So I do think there are two aspects that we really see it. On the one hand side, it comes down to craft, and then to also the ability to scale. Or for us, it's really about the creativity and then the execution part. And where we see AI being included into workflows and processes, it's really when it comes to the execution or the scalability of the output. Whereas when you are in the process of creating, it's really about the human empathy, being vulnerable, where you just described, and also making sure that you bring like your talents, your like somewhat also imperfections to the process, and to create some sometimes even serendipity, or like to also create magical ideas. And I do think that at the intersections of having, the skills, having the curiosity, being driven by the process of finding out or creating something new, and then pair it with like the technological enablement, or enlarging it through AI tools, or spare it with it so that you can really scale it up and also bring it into like the wider environment, is something that we're super passionate about, and that we like for the group really move forward. But then again, I'm also super thankful to be collaborating and creating synergies, not only for the content creation part, but also for, like, we have with Planet Group also the experts in regards to the technological side, or when it comes to the media parts of how you then leverage it when you want to spread the word and like use it in the different channels. So these synergies and the intersections is really what moves us forward, and it's also somewhat unique to our group. And I'm really excited to be at the linchpin, so to say, and collaborating with all of these experts.
I love that. It sounds like you're explaining it as it all comes from a human creativity, and then which is the raw form of an idea or a concept, or just that it doesn't have a plan of distribution yet or any of that, right? But then you can kind of use that in elevate that using AI, and maybe use it for, I think a practical example might be different variations of films. Or what we do is very similar, and it really resonates with me what you just explained, because we built Wondercraft on that exact same ethos. It's not an AI platform. It's really starting with human creativity, and we're just using AI to elevate that into, in our case, it's audio productions, right? So we work with a lot of brands and agencies to create audio ads, for instance, or voiceovers. And it all starts with the copywriting. It's a blank sheet, and you can start collaborating with your team to really come up with the concepts, and then take that in different directions with audio, and applying different voices and music. And I love that stance on application of AI. So it really, really resonates with me. So on top of that, so I'm as a business leader and also recovering COO at a public company. The company culture of creativity always fascinates me, and it's an endless fascination, because all companies are different, all company cultures are different, right? And the culture to me kind of comes down to, I'm curious to see what you think about this, but culture to me kind of comes down to the ways that you set these systems or processes. They might be outspoken, or it might be quite implicit or hidden. You set those in place to collaborate on solutions for a shared mission, and then you fill them with emotional human beings, right? What is your take on fostering a creative culture within a company? I mean, you're your company, but also you're working with brands. You're consulting, you're sitting with them. How do you empower teams to maintain a culture of creativity and innovation?
I do think on the one hand side, you as a company need to create the spaces of where like people can come together and really, have the opportunity to indulge into their expertise, but then also combine it with other experts one, and just showcase of where like it brings them. Because being empathetic with like complementary disciplines, or also being driven by the curiosity of creating like new ways how to, what a campaign can look like, how you also can create like stories, what you can tell and bring to like the brand building that we do. And like, fittingly enough, and I do think it's brilliant, like we have a space, like a somewhat space that's called the Spark Academy, where like creators can come together and literally create spark. So they are collaborating and get input from like industry experts, and then they also get challenges or introduced to like new ways of working, thinking, or also producing creative output. And I love that, because the like way that we then bring it into the organization is something, it's rather also decentralized, so not only focusing on a specific kind of environment, or also focusing on a specific kind of um, engagement, but rather also pulling and in like bringing those incentives or also energies into us, really feels to me like a fitting how for us it can create this kind of cultural approach. And then on the other side, it's also about the enablement through tools, through like the collaboration framework, through providing also the right kind of tooling, so that there is no hindrance in that. And Yeah, I mean, then in the end, it also comes down to being driven individually and being curious of also learning about it. But that then would be probably my personal opinion on, or also at least my personal experience over the past couple of years.
That makes sense. I was going to ask you about how you get a company out of a creative rut, but I'll ask that on a personal note instead. Like, what do you do personally when you need to get into a creative mode? What's your habit around your own creativity? Just we all have our methods and routines, and I certainly have them too. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Don't, yeah.
um, what's your go-to medicine for being in a creative rut?
Music, and bringing myself in other contexts, like something that is
Mm,
completely like unknown to me, and just see what happens. And most of the time it's like either art again, like going and like also visiting exhibitions or visiting cities that I've never been to before, reading books. So just also switching contexts, because I do think having a rut just means that you're somewhat also involved into the environment that you've been to for like too
mm,
long a period of time, and just reflect on that, also like not like getting to know that, and then also consciously decide that you now need to move somewhere else to just also potentially appreciate being back in that environment again. But getting new stimuli, getting new inspirations is something that I really, for me at least, look into and try to also do on a regular basis.
I love that. I love that. You captured a lot there. First of all, I like the idea of the creative space you have at work. Second, work is as one of those things, right? You can go, I'm assuming, interacting with other people, interacting with tools, and probably pick up a book and sit on a beanbag somewhere. Maybe I don't know what the space looks like, but I'm just painting my own picture. It sounds lovely. Bringing perspectives, I think it's so important as well, right? And I can do that on a daily basis. I just move the place that I actually sit, even if it's just in my home studio or my home office. So I think those are very, very important things. I always love hearing, while we're on the topic of creativity here still, I always love hearing like great authors and creators that, they always reveal, like Stephen King, I read the other day about the hard work of creating, right? That it's hard work and discipline and sweat. It's not just that serendipitous idea that comes to you. And I always resonated with that because I find solace in that when it's hard sometimes to create. But given your background in like systems thinking, you talked about this a little earlier. You're playing chess, which is a different kind of creativity in a way. It's a set system, but you can be creative within that. How do you balance creativity with structure in your work? It feels like your background is perfect for that. Is there such a thing as an ideal process for generating new ideas in complex environments like marketing and communications?
I don't think that there is an ideal process. I do think it's super individual. And for me, what I come to realize, and it relates to the question that you posed before, and was is really being cautious around when I'm in like one part of like systems thinking, also like the daily business, or when you're really driven by by somewhat rather haptical. I just like call it that way, and like the creative process for me is somewhat more fluid. And so when I'm like trying to figure out, or when I'm just going, or when I'm trying to also be creative, I like do really appreciate the space, or creating those spaces of switching environments, going for a walk, like picking up like a book, or just getting my head into another context, because I do realize, and it's also for like probably given my chess background, that when I'm more into a systems thinking approach, that I'm somewhat into like a fixed idea, and also then the execution. Whereas when I'm like rather in the process of creating something new, I need some other impulses there again, and just also being cautious around the different moods or the different requirements that I have for myself. And then combining it again is really something that resonated with me a lot. How do you like, what do you like, you just said that you move your like space that you're right now into your, how do you like change that, or what do you make out of it?
Well, I find myself sometimes, 'cause, when you're forced to do something, I have to write this post or this article, I have to write this spec for a product, whatever it may be, and you're forced to kind of be creative. To me, it seems like we're all in different cycles of the day of when it's a good time to kind of be creative, and you feel open minded and free of restraint when you need to produce something like a text. And then it can, I find myself trying to force a text or something in a time of the day when I'm not really that into it. It's not a natural, inspiring moment of the day, which for me usually is in the morning when I can be free of all the overhanging to dos that I've forgotten for the last day, or I can feel like I'm free of restraint. But what I loved about your advisor is just what I try to do is just move around as well. I try to sit somewhere else, or go talk to someone, do something else, or maybe plan to do it later. I think that's something that I constantly do to kind of maximize creativity. Um, but I have this flaw in me that you helped me out with, because I always think that there is some sort of ultimate way of doing things. There is an ultimate creative solution to things. But when you're saying there's not, and I know that, rationally, I know that it's not the case. But sometimes I can feel like I'm hindering myself because I try to find that perfect creative route. And that's a personal battle that I have with creativity.
How come, like, I mean, when you talk to other industry experts, have you like, I think that is the beauty in it, right? Having, these individual ways, having also these individual like point of views, and then just bringing it all together really is something that is truly special. And
Mm.
also let me appreciate the uniqueness of like the process of being creative, so to say.
Yeah, but I love that. But I think I think I put personal, pressure on myself to that it has to be good enough to, be up to the standard that I'm going for. And I'm constantly challenging myself on. I mean, this podcast is one of those challenges. I haven't done
Is it?
content like this since I did student radio, which is a running joke. And I was very against it because it's not going to be as good as I want it to be. But then, our wonderful co-founders and our team, like, just let's just do it and see what happens. And I like that because I always want to be iterative in the creative approach too. You want to try something, okay? The first version of this text, it sucks, right? And then you work on it and you work on it. And the same thing with this podcast. And I think that's something that I'm trying to live by a lot more. I'm trying to make that more of a core value, that it's okay to get started and improve over time, as part of the kind of creative journey.
That is like, thank you for sharing. I do think that like a lot struggle with it, and I mean, I'm the same. I'm also like, there are tons of ideas in my head, and I always think that like maybe they're not good enough, or how do you really then also realize it? And maybe a personal anecdote. So I have this blank canvas, like a huge
Mm.
one in my apartment, and it's just
Hmm.
blank. And you know why? Because I like love the idea of creating images or also paintings on it,
Mm.
but I've never dared of just like painting it because I always think it doesn't match my expectations. And then the interesting part is that I've now started creating them in a small scale, just also to challenge myself around at some point getting into the way of having, a large painting of myself also in the creative process. Um, and it it also it made me realize that perfectionism somewhat is an illusion. It also hinders the way of how you bring ideas into the world. And rather, I would want to have many ideas that I can say that like I tried to create them and maybe they didn't work out, but it's also a matter of who didn't they work out for, and what is the measure that you put it against. And that is something that probably is also what you experience with the way how you approach your projects, right?
100%. Yeah, I'm trying to teach my kids to not be like me.
That sounds odd.
In that aspect, because I mean, what you said there is like creating for the sake of just creating and just for yourself is so powerful and great. And I admire everyone who does it. I admire artists. I've been in music for a long time, and I admire everyone who does it, and you can see that they're doing for themselves. And through that comes through the absolute authenticity of it, right? It's like, I don't care what you think about it. I just did it anyway. And here it is.
Yeah.
And you can say what you think about it. I think we're conditioned probably, and I am at least conditioned to, certain level of performance and all that stuff. So I also have, figuratively many blank canvases around that I use. And this happened to me almost daily. I can have a great idea in the morning that I start to flesh out. And then if I'm in a bad mood or I'm tired or it's been one of those days, and you look at that idea again, I discard it. It's like, that was a stupid idea. And it wasn't, maybe, you know what I mean? We're kind of, it's a struggle in even if you're not a living artist, there is the creativity of work and how you express yourself through work and what you do. That is certainly a creative process. It's very personal and difficult at times. That's why I love having these conversations, because creativity is part of everyone's life and work, whether they admit to it or not. There's creativity and it's a human behavior that is quite delicate and fascinating. Well, thanks for sharing. I want to pose a pact here that you will paint that picture.
But don't send me a deadline, please, because that would put me under pressure.
No, it's just for yourself. It's just a contract with yourself. So that's good. I would love to see it. I'm sure you're a great artist.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, it would be great. We're going to round up here. I'm taking a lot of your time. I have a few more questions about the future of AI, since you're in that field so much. I mean, as AI continues to evolve, how do you really see its impact on human creativity? Will it augment or challenge the traditional roles of creatives, you think? What's your stance on that on a short and long-term perspective?
I think in both short and long-term perspective, it's going to be both. On the one hand side, we do really already see today that it can be an enhancement, that it can be a collaborator, that we can, multiply it, dabble around, leverage it in also the creative process when it comes to campaigning or the storyboarding aspect, or just use it as an enlargement of also the skill set or the tool set that you have at hand. And I'm really curious to see how this will evolve. And given the also development and the speed of the process that the technological infrastructure is evolving into, I do think that there will be many more benefits that we see on how we can integrate, how we can use it, how it also interacts with us, right? Because at the moment, we have a lot of two-dimensionals and ways of interacting. But I mean, I do still believe that at some point, the 3D aspects will also we will immerse into them. We will also create new spaces through them, and we will also interact with each other in a different way. And to experience that, to also create narratives in those new spaces, creativity is essential. And innovation, technology will be a driver, but you will always be in the driver's seat in making sure that you also incorporate it. But then the challenging aspect will be to stay at the pulse of also the development, to also make sure that you continuously challenge yourself, like your creative process through it, how you also experience and not be like hindered by somewhat the potential also hindrances of using it, but rather also stay curious around how you can make use for yourself and your teams about it. While at the same time, it's also a matter of finding the right tools for the right contexts, because there are so many of them. And then making sure that you combine it and like what we've talked about in the beginning in regards to the values, in regards to the clarity that you want to use it. I'm really like a believer that it's going to be a benefit for us all, and I do see the opportunities. How do you say that? There are more opportunities than there are going to be challenges, but there will still be challenges, especially in the way of how we integrate it and how we also use it in the societal context.
Interesting. A few things there, and how you're going to consume things. And you talked about maybe new form factors emerging, right? We have this spatial computing thing happening. To bubble up, and who knows what that's going to look like in 10 years, to walk around with glasses, or if I can finally have some cool AR features in my contact lenses. That would be helpful, so I can recognize people at events and stuff like that. One aspect that another guest of the show actually brought up, I thought was interesting. We don't talk a ton about how we're going to consume media and how AI is going to help our lives in the future, but a quite interesting aspect of what it could be like is that we're going to use these AI agents to do a lot of our bidding for us, do our shopping, do our Eva, I know exactly what brand of art canvas paper and paint that you use and what's best for you, because I, as your AI agent, know you best.
Yeah.
And in that world, what is the role of brands and how we interact with brands? How are we going to communicate in a world where AI is kind of an intermediary between companies, products, and consumers?
So at the moment, we're really looking a lot into those AI agents, and we also like craft and shape it with a dedicated team within our group. So we're super curious around learning about that, especially how it impacts like the branding aspects. And we do believe that at the moment we're really in like the early steps of integrating that into like the different workflows, and also finding those use cases of where it can be really be of benefit. And then again, I do see that brands, because you've asked around their like also impact or like interaction with the customers, I do think that the better they propose and bring like the offering to the interaction with those agents, or provide the information in a way that they can really also integrate it into the larger need that the customers have, that prompt like or send their agent onto the different use case or context that they want them to like search information of. It's really something around the structuring. Like on the one hand side, you have the customer and the need and what they are looking for, and then also supplying that need with the information that's helpful, or that is also reflecting the personal interests of the customer that asks it, is really also for me or for us something that we look into. And that for an organization means that they really need to be clear on their data governance and the structure, and being sure that they also combine it, or make sure that they also are available at those respective intersections that you're going to be having. And what was funny yesterday, I had a talk with a friend, and we were joking that you also, like in the future, him and I, we will have our own AI agents that then would also have the conversations for us. Just imagine. I mean, also for you and I, for our conversation, how would that look like? And
Right.
here, like for me, it's really like appreciate you being like this like empathetic, and also like in the human interaction kind of like the warmth that you bring to it, and also like the curiosity that leads like the conversation in unexpected ways. So I'm rather also curious. And just the other day, I'm not sure if you saw that, what I found really curious is that there was this one guy having exactly those two agents who started a conversation with each other.
Oh,
And
yes.
do
Yeah.
you see that? And I
Yeah, it's so
found it
original.
so interesting because I mean, it was somewhat like really formal, and also somewhat like predictive. But
Yeah.
then what I didn't expect is that they started spiraling, and like that at some point they, the conversation just took a turn and took the turn again, and you're like, sorry, that was unexpected for me, because it just didn't have an end anymore, and I was just. We were making jokes about it, how that could happen when we have our own AI agents again. And I do think that for brands, coming back to your questions, this is not something that really should happen, but that you really also know how to bring it into the context, and when to stop or when to provide the right information, so that it really brings the value to the search that the AI agent is really up for.
Right. Yeah, I mean, fascinating. It's so many different scenarios you can play out here. How brands can interact. What's the value of? What's the purpose of websites and e-commerce if that's all AI agents and content finding its way to you, and the endless kind of personalization of content, right? It's going to be an abundance of personalization. So it's interesting to kind of envision or thinking about what a world looks like for brands and companies trying to get out there with their communication and building brands is certainly something that's interesting. I always think that there's something like a way back to maybe traditional advertising, and being in front of people becomes more valuable again, because the canvas of being showing your brand in a mass environment is going to be less and less, and it's going to be different just different channels for that outreach. Anyway, that's interesting. We have to have you back on the show and see how the future plays out, Eva. I think that's what we
I
need to
would be
do.
happy to.
We gotta let you go soon, but I have two more simple questions for you. What's on your playlist these days? Any music, any podcasts, any audiobooks? We like audio at Wondercraft, so is there any recommendation you want to give us in terms of some cool media that we should check out?
In terms of music, it's really just the suggestions that Spotify has for me these days, given like the context that I have. So it's
Do you do
nothing
the AI
specific.
DJ to listen?
Imagine, I mean, how awesome would that be? I would be really up for it if someone on the show has a suggestion around how they can level up my music proposition, or also playlist. I would be happy to learn about. I'm still looking for it. But no, yes, I mean, really simple, just indulging into the different kind of music streams. But then these days, I'm like when it comes to podcasts, Diary of a CEO, I love it.
All right.
And the Huberman podcast is
Yeah.
also something that I'm super interested in, because and we haven't like touched on that, but I'm really passionate around the intersections of neuroscience and AI,
Oh.
because I do think that the one can learn from the other, and the other way around, or not. And that is something that I'm currently looking into, because I do think that there are synergies, but also somewhat misinterpretations around really neuroscience has an impact on AI or not. So having the balance around the business focus areas or the neuroscientific inputs is something that I'm indulged into, and that is also what my reading list looks about. I'm somewhat curious around systems and like complex problem environment. I would need to look it up, but then I'm not sure. Have you heard of the book Breath? For sure you must have. It's like
Mm.
about the science of breathing and how we can bring that
Oh,
into,
yes, I have heard about that. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
It's,
Do you have
yeah.
any breathing habits that you do?
Not yet, potentially I should look into that, or after the book. I've just started, so maybe when we talk again, I can tell you a little bit more about it, if I got hooked on it or not.
Yeah, do it. I mean, I've played around with that. Actually, Huberman talks a lot about breathing and different exercises. There's a guy called Wim Hofman. I don't know if you've heard about him.
Sure,
the Iceman.
Yeah.
He kind of started a craze about that a couple of years ago, and I tried it out at this event I was at, and it's quite interesting. You can do a lot with breath, and I mean, in Indian culture and yoga culture, it's been around for thousands of years. So there's something to it.
Do you still do it, or like, do you have a breathing habit?
Yeah, actually, and I learned that doing the military service as well. They teach you that to calm down, or to just find some sort of momentarily peace when things are stressful. But as things goes, when you're stressful, you kind of throw things out the window and just power on. But when I have my senses right, I try to do that, actually. Last year, I also went to a Zen monastery to just learn how to properly sit and just be, which was a fascinaning thing that I recommend everyone to do.
How long for?
I was only there for 4 days, but it was a journey of learning how Zen meditation, which is really just about sitting and counting your breaths. And it's one of those things that we as humans know rationally. We know that breathing is everything for us, right? We can't live without breathing. I mean, that's the one thing that we do need in every minute of our life. And then how you can actually use that to regulate your mood and really regulate your physical body. It's fascinating. And the same thing with sitting. I find that very soothing. I always like it to, like, you're closing down you have too many tabs in your browser, right? And just closing them all down. That's kind of what that does to me. Also very important for creativity, I find. But also the more stressed I am, the less I do it. So I really have to put discipline in to find the moment, or like you have to invest the time in it, I guess, to do it.
It's interesting that you say that, and we can wrap up shortly. But this morning I was talking to a friend that the busier it gets, the harder it is to foster stillness. And I, like, at least for me, and that is also what you were reflecting about, right? However, I also could second that the busier it gets, the more important stillness is, because then only you can really shut down all the open tabs in your head, and you're like literally also on your computer, and appreciate like the moment of just, I wouldn't say solitude, but rather also like the finding back to one's environment, and also like the thoughts that you might have had.
Yeah, so there's a piece, I think,
right? Yeah,
everyone can use. Eva, this has been so wonderful. You have an amazing career behind you and also ahead of you, which is going to follow with much curiosity and excitement as you're heading into this. This is my last question now, if you were to offer advice to someone graduating school this year and who's passionate about creativity and AI, what would your advice to them be to navigate their future?
My advice would be really also what we've discussed earlier. Just start and see where it takes you. Don't think it through too much. If you're really passionate about it, then see what your next step, focus on the next step of where you can start, and then just try and fail and try again, and talk about it with experts, with your friends, and experience of where you can also foster in a sense of togetherness, but also for yourself. And just don't be hindered by also expectations that someone might put on you, or that you might have to yourself, and just focus on the passion that you have, and see where it takes you.
That is beautiful. I'm going to play that for my kids when they wake up. If they haven't already. That's solid advice. I love that. Eva, this has been so much fun. I'm going to take this away with me as well. You said it earlier, perfection is an illusion. That's something I'm going to live by from now on. I thought that was super helpful. So thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for watching and listening to Makes You Wonder. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a solid and hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. For extra karma, please share with your mom and your friends too. Makes You Wonder is made with love by Wondercraft, the AI audio studio for brands and creative teams. It's hosted by Oskar Sarander. You can find Oskar on LinkedIn, X, and Threads. Links in show notes. This episode was produced by Alex Hughes Morgan. It was edited by Zaina. A nice young man named Dimitri from Wondercraft was the executive producer. Learn more about Wondercraft at wondercraft.ai.